Let's jump right into this. Welcome to today's explainer. If you are a biblical counselor, a pastoral care worker, or, anyone involved in structured spiritual care, we really need to talk about something crucial. It's an often overlooked part of your ministry, and that is your documentation. Honestly, the way you document your sessions matters so much. So today, we're zooming in specifically on how to master the objective section of your SOAP notes. We're going to make sure your documentation honors both truth and compassion.
So, is your counseling documentation a protective anchor or a legal risk? It's a heavy question, right? Because writing notes, it isn't just administrative red tape or bureaucracy. It is literally a profound act of stewardship. You are doing sacred work with vulnerable people. The actual language you use in those files, well, it can either protect the counselee, the ministry, and the witness of Christ-centered care, or it can introduce some really unnecessary legal ambiguity and role confusion. Our main goal today is to make absolutely sure your notes serve as that protective anchor.
Okay, here's our quick roadmap for the explainer. 1. Redefining the SOAP note. 2. The objective section. 3. Anchors, not weapons. 4. The 4 documentation guardrails. And finally, number 5. Bad versus better notes. Let's kick things off with Section 1, Redefining the SOAP note. Look, a pastoral SOAP note is not a sermon. It's not your private diary, and it's definitely not a theological essay. And it is certainly not the place to prove your profound counselor insight or play licensed therapist. Now, the familiar skeleton you probably know: subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. That stays exactly the same, but the vocabulary changes. Your note has to be true, meaning it reflects factual reality. It must be restrained, avoiding unnecessary sensitive details or trying to read into their motives. It has to be useful, supervised, and above all, firmly anchored in Scripture. That protects everyone involved. Moving right along to Section 2, the objective section. What exactly is the objective section? Basically, it's what the biblical or pastoral counselor actually observed and did in the session. In a pastoral setting, this section is strictly about what you did. No clinical diagnoses allowed here. Instead, you're recording the specific pastoral or biblical interventions you actually utilized during that time. Did you listen attentively? Offer comfort? Maybe you clarified boundaries or provided a gentle challenge. Right here is where you record those concrete, observable care actions. Okay, Section 3. Anchors, not weapons. This one is absolutely crucial. The core idea here is that Scripture should function as an anchor, not as a weapon or a proof texting shortcut. Now, this might require a bit of a paradigm shift for some of us. In the objective section, when you use Scripture parentheticals, they are meant to identify the biblical logic behind your specific care actions. They are absolutely not just decorative Bible references you scatter around to make the note look more spiritual. And they are definitely not proof texting shortcuts used to judge the counselee. Instead, think of them as documentation anchors. They clearly demonstrate the why behind what you did, fully grounding your pastoral intervention in biblical wisdom. Let's look at how this maps out in practice. Say your action was attentive listening and restrained speech. Well, your anchor there is James 1:19 and Proverbs 18:13. Or if you used open, searching questions to invite truthfulness, you might anchor that with Mark 10:51 or John 5:6. Let's say you helped someone frame their grief. You document a psalmic poetic summary, anchored right there in Psalm 13. See how that works? You are explicitly and clearly connecting your methodology in the room directly to its scriptural foundation. Next up, Section 4, the 4 documentation guardrails. To use these anchors effectively and ethically, we have 4 essential guidelines. First up, use short verse addresses. We're talking brief citations here, like literally just writing James 1:19 in parentheses, instead of pasting in a massive written-out quote. Second, match the action taken. Your parenthetical must accurately reflect the specific intervention you actually performed. Third, and this is so important, do not use them as weapons or judgments. Scripture should never be used to make unsupported claims, spiritually pressure the counselee, or label their behavior. And fourth, reflect reality. Don't imply that a specific verse was quoted aloud to the counselee if, actually, it was just guiding you silently in your own head during the session. So, putting it all together, here is your simple step-by-step procedure. Step 1 happens right there in the counseling room. You perform the pastoral intervention. Maybe you clarify some boundaries or offer some comfort. Step 2 happens later, when you sit down to write. You identify the biblical logic behind that specific care action you just took. And finally, Step 3. Document that action with a brief verse citation, making absolutely sure it reflects reality.
Honestly, doing it this way creates a very clean, highly professional, and spiritually robust note.
Let's bring this to life in Section 5, Bad versus Better Notes.
Let's look at a really stark contrast here. An inappropriate, weaponized note looks something like this. Counselee was rebellious against James 1:19. Yikes, right? That is entirely inappropriate. It's judgmental, it's speculative, and honestly, it uses the Bible to attack the counselee right there in their permanent record. Remember, we document our own Christ-centered interventions. We do not label the counselee's behavior with Bible verses. The correct, anchored approach is simply this. Counselor used slow listening and reflective summary, followed by James 1:19 in parentheses. See the difference? It is objective, it's true, and it's incredibly restrained. Now here is another vital comparison, and this one deals with what we call clinical role drift. If you are not operating in a licensed clinical role, writing something like diagnosed client with depression introduces some massive legal ambiguity. You're basically implying psychotherapy or medical care. No way, you don't want to do that. The much better pastoral approach is to document exactly what you did within your proper scope. So you'd write, counselor summarized grief in a lament-shaped frame, anchored with Psalm 113. This perfectly reinforces our rule of 3. The note is truthful to the pain they are experiencing, it's restrained in its scope, and it's legally cautious because it completely avoids clinical phrasing.
Does your documentation protect the counselee, the ministry, and the witness of Christ-centered care? As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. Take a second and look back at your recent SOAP notes. Are your scripture parentheticals actually serving as true documentation anchors for your own actions? Or are they kind of slipping into proof texting and judgment? Remember, careful documentation, it really is a profound act of love and stewardship. By simply following these guardrails, you ensure that your records accurately reflect your Christ-centered interventions in a way that is truthful, restrained, and deeply protective for everyone involved. Keep learning, keep refining your practice, and hey, thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.